everyone, Ivy League Gaming here, and today we're playing Dragonheir, Silent Gods. For today's video, we're going to continue my series. This is the final third one of a three-part series. We are talking Elemental Affinity, and for today's video, we're talking Lightning and Radiance. Let's talk about synergy and who best fulfills the roles. Yes, so fulfilling the roles of a general team comp, people that are most useful in your boss dungeon stages, who's the best to make a rally team, Dauntless team with, who is best for a Vortex team. And we are talking Season 1, just to be clear, giving some love to those Season 1 players that are sad they're not starting Season 2 yet. And so, you know, you kind of got to go through the motions, I guess. Fair enough. And for the synergy of Season 1, our Lightning and Radiance are together, which is a pretty strong pairing and a unique pairing because there's lots of support on one side, but not as much on the other. It's a little bit quirky, but there's definitely some solid heroes. And it's pretty easy to build a solid team depending on your luck. Luckily, there's some lower tier heroes that we can use, and we're going to talk about that today. So if you didn't see it already, I have already made videos on the other synergies talking about, I guess more so, you know, just same idea. Team composition, who's best at their roles, who fulfills whatever roles, and maybe in niche areas as well. Who's the best DPSs? Yeah, and Vortex. That's what we're going to go through today. So, now we are on to these fellas. We have Radiance, we have Lightning, and well, we're going to continue our conversation about free-to-play friendly, not really looking at the legendaries overall. So first, let's start off with our tanks. Our defensive support people. A lot of the tanks are great for more than one obvious role. Like Garius is the best tank by far, even better than some legendaries, let's be honest. He is solid for your Radiance team or Lightning or anywhere, honestly. But he's not just a tank that sits there and takes up damage or helps keep your team alive with a buff or keeps himself alive with a buff. He also is a wonderful healer. And over the battle, he stacks up more defense, which is amazing, as it makes him heal even more. He has insane potential for healing. So don't forget when you're looking at tanks, a lot of them have multiple roles, and if you need a healer on your team, you might only need Garius. Garius as a tank and healer might be enough to get you by, plus he has the aura. So he's the perfect one to start off with when we're talking about who you could use as a tank. Clovis and Kamari are okay. They're a little bit niche. I think Kamari's the reviver. Yeah. So he does have a little resurrect, but I don't know that I would use him in many areas besides... I'm sorry, why am I always yawning when I'm recording for Dragonheir? I swear it's a curse lately. I swear. I swear. But I don't think he's as useful for things beyond, like, PvP. He does knock up the targets, though, hey. So he does provide some crowd control. And, yeah, defense up 2 when the battle begins only, unfortunately. So I think he's really more of a PvP guy. I do like dueling, though. I have built him. He brings defense in arena, but I don't really use him in arena. More so, I like the attack penalty that he brings a little bit extra with an AoE on his battle skill, but his main skill here, it's weird that he has this like range thing. It makes him look like he's not a tank, but he is, where he grants ally protection, defense up, and recovery over time. So, or he grants allies ally protection, and then he gains defense up and recovery over time. So he can help keep himself alive while he's taking damage off the enemies. He's pretty good if you don't have a Garius and you're looking for a Radiant team. I don't know about... The rares are okay, but at least, I mean, I guess with him, at least he brings attack penalty too. That's pretty decent. But overall, I think there's enough options with the epic. She'd probably be using the epic tanks in this one. Same thing here, like the lightning tank that's rare is not the greatest, honestly. But these ones are pretty interesting. Lydia's got some quirky uses as well. She does help shield your allies. She gains immortality and attack speed up, and then control immunity to all allies and unleashes the battle skill once. So this is a confusing wording, which I didn't realize. Like, she actually makes sure allies use their battle skill when she uses her ultimate. So it's a unique skill, and control immunity is pretty solid. So definitely in any area you need that. You might bring her into the team, maybe against some of those quirky boss fights in the endgame, but I haven't really found myself prioritizing building her over some of the other tanks, honestly. Naguk and Volklug are okay, but I think if you have the option, you're probably going to go with those Radiance tanks instead. I can't really see using these guys in most areas, except like, yeah, that has a stun and some quirkiness, maybe for arena or something. And here, at least, okay, this one is the attack penalty only 1, not 2, and accuracy penalty 2. Can dispel a buff from them, but only a 50% chance, 75% chance to dispel a buff. It kind of feels like you're not quite good enough. So I'm not in love with the tanks for lightning. But let's talk about our support heroes. So lightning support's actually really solid. Enna is a great choice, first or second out of the rare box when you start playing and you get that from the battle pass. I chose Enna first, then Sigrid second, because I was focusing a fire and poison team, and I was having a lot of trouble with the flame domain, and she can at least dispel a debuff from your allies and give some heal. Recover every time to an ally here, and yeah. Restores as well. So she brings in a lot of support in areas where you need a cleanser when you're dealing with debuffs, so she's a great, like, budget option for sure. And then I would shout, like, Garana is pretty cool as well. She can grant shields to allies, which is awesome. And she can also inflict accuracy penalty. Dispels a buff every third target, or sorry, dispels a buff from the target every 3 attacks. So if you need a buff dispeller and a little bit of survivability, she might be a pretty low-key rare suggestion. And I should probably say with her, like, something like Ancient Battlefield is pretty good because shields don't count as a buff. And so you can help keep your team alive with a shield and dispel the buff from the boss. But, yeah, not take the hits of someone who's just putting, like, a buff like, I don't know, increased defense or continuous heal. And yeah, she's a budget option, so I think she's actually pretty underrated. Grover's another fun one who can do some damage, but also steal random buffs. And he's all about stealing, like stealing ultimate energy, stealing buffs. He's pretty cool, but a little bit quirky and probably more niche use for single target. But you can definitely I've seen him used in the boss stages too for dungeons, so if you need that role, you can definitely use the rare options. And Irina, we can't even not talk about Irina. I mean, I kind of call her the budget version of, like, Yola, because she brings attack penalty 2 as well on her ultimate with a little bit of an AoE, plus she has a little bit of damage here, and yeah, grants a little shield as well, but really it's for this attack penalty 2 when you want that in the team, plus a little bit of AoE damage. Irina's actually a pretty strong pick, especially early on, but Yola's probably our queen of the lightning support and damage dealers. She does okay damage. It's not like insane, you know, but it's 3 times and 230% attack. So you can actually build her to pump out some good damage, but you really want her with accuracy to land her crowd control, or at least her attack penalty 2, which is a 100% chance. She's so good for the role of attack penalty. It's an AoE, it's really wonderful. And because she's hitting 3 times, she's a great candidate for Witch's Remains or the Crown of Unclean in any of your battles. So she's more the crowd control. We've also got Shook that brings it as well. So he brings attack penalty plus a recharging speed penalty, which is cool. He also dispels shields. So dispelling shields, there's not a lot of heroes that do that and he's wonderful for that role. It could be something very useful for like the Grave of Curse, for example, as a shield dispeller. Plus he gains ultimate energy here when he gains a buff or when an enemy gains a buff. And so with all this in mind, he's actually pretty solid for the endgame content, like when you're working with the endgame Resurgent Dragon or even just the boss stages in the Chaos Shadows. So you wouldn't regret building him. Same thing, Udakatel's got some utility as well with dispelling shields or removing a buff here, but I kind of, in defense up to allies is helpful, but I kind of feel like between the two, I would build Shook for that extra attack penalty as great value. Nathaniel is also really good support. Lightning really have some good heroes, these epics and rares. He brings shields that are really nice with target max HP and enlightenment, and he brings recovery over time. He dispels a debuff from allies. So, and keep his range in mind. If you're going to use him somewhere, keeping them close together is important for Nathaniel's skills. But I actually used Nathaniel quite heavily once we got to the end game content. So again, another one, if you use him early on, you probably won't regret it. Plus, with all the shields, there's some harder later stages of the Vortex main boss fights where you benefit more from having shields and less from healing. So if you're working with a lightning team, he might be another option for survivability. All right, now let's not get out of there. Let's go to the others. So Radiant supports. This is again another great set of support heroes. These two elements really rock in the support, which is great because their DPS units are pretty squishy, which of course we'll talk about. Catherine is a solid healer, also brings debuff immunity, which is not on many people at all, which is also one of the best ways to deal with the end game dragon, Resurgent Dragon. Prevent the debuffs from happening in the first place with debuff immunity is about the best thing you could ask for. And you don't even need the books because it's like 30 to 35 seconds for the cooldowns of coming back to those skills. So you will probably find yourself using your Catherine in the end game if you don't early on, which was my case. I didn't use her at all early on, but at the end I used her all the time. Nessa is the only non-legendary option for healing prohibition with this synergy, and it's only on the ultimate, but at least it's a 100% chance to land. So if you're working against some bosses that need that, it's okay. But when we're talking about... I'm so sorry, I can't believe I'm yawning so much. When we're talking about, like, Pillar of Trial and needing healing prohibition, she's really not enough. So this faction really lacks in that, which is really hard to complete Pillar of Trial with her. You just kind of have to overpower the boss, unfortunately. But she does bring attack penalty too, as well, on her battle skills. So she's probably a little underrated and underutilized, but that's because we have amazing people like Sigrid, the rare poison hero that can do attack penalty and healing prohibition better overall. So poor Nessa is not used as well. Groom is the one we actually get from doing Fey Y or Fey Meander, right? And I really liked him a lot. I actually did use him quite heavily in some content, like pushing Pillar of Trial. He has stun, he has attack penalty, he has blind, he has this dispelling a debuff from a random ally aspect. So I actually had fun using him, and he helped me out a little bit with some crowd control as an AoE. Down here, this is the fun part for Radiance. So we're still on support heroes because they're so good. But Carion and Meredith. Meredith is one of those people you can use early on and you really need her not built. Hardly at all. Just stick her in a corner where she's not going to, hopefully not going to get hit. In any case where you can do that, and you're going to love Meredith. She heals targets by 25 of their max HP. 25%. That's one of the biggest for target max HP heals. So it doesn't matter what her stats are. It only matters what the target is. So if you really need healing, and plus she's got it here, targets HP, nothing about her kit matters what her stats are. Unless you're using her places you need to keep her alive and take some hits, then it's an issue, of course. But you can use her at very low levels in very efficient ways, and you'll be quite surprised that she might be one of your best healing options, including for some hard content like Ancient Battlefield, where you might need healing, but you don't want buffs. Carion is our other strong healer for this faction. He brings a single target here, and then an AoE with a defense up. So another great option for heals, although again, 15% of the target's max HP, but the defense up buff. So like you wouldn't use him in Ancient Battlefield because he's bringing a buff as examples, but you could use him pretty much anywhere else if you need a little healing for your Radiance team. Not really good. I mean, Kaleido seems okay, but he's like a melee healer. He's kind of different. He's all right, but I still would much prefer the other two over him for most content. And Austin's too random. I'm not really a fan of him. All right, so let's talk about the niche things now. So Rally is our DPS unit for Radiance, right? Honestly, I think you can get by with some content using like Hegio and Martina as your main DPSs for Rally. But they're both melee, which definitely has its drawbacks in a lot of content. Endgame content, pushing the Continental Challenges or the Chaos Shadows, you're really going to struggle with Rally units that are not ranged. So I think he might be the only one that's actually epic and ranged. Because even some of the best ones, like, I think, is it Avania? Yeah, Avania is a really great rare for Rally, especially for enabling your allies. But again, she's a melee, and the melee units do really bad in that content, where you're going to finally end up using them. Although melee can be fine for something like Vortex, but I don't see most people building a Rally team unless you have a strong legendary like Filto or Thalendor, maybe even. But Alton is kind of more of a, or Laurenthiel are more like enablers. Huberg, I really do think people like him. I think he's surprised some people too. He seems really interesting. So maybe if you pulled him, you'd try to build a team around him as well. And you could use the epics for support. But I don't think you would just right off the gate go full Rally with rares and epics only. I feel like you'd choose something else as your main DPS. But a lot about Rally is needing to have Rally up. Like, this guy is ridiculous. But he must have the Rally on him in order to get the extra damage kind of thing. That's really a lot of this. Like, a lot of people, if there's Rally, then they ignore defense, or then they do X amount more damage. So keep that in mind. And a lot of people that I thought were going to be ranged for some reason, as if I thought the girl with swords was going to be ranged, just ended up being, everyone's just so melee based, which really limits you on where you're going to use them. Not the best, but if you are going to use some, I would say Kaylee's and Avania for the rares can be pretty helpful as well for like helping your team. She's got this cool straight ahead thing too, like Filto, but not quite as hard hitting as Filto, but still can actually surprise people. But still a limited DPS option. I don't think I would go with that for most cases. Dauntless is kind of similar, honestly. Like, I can't see building a Dauntless team with just rares and epics either. Like, Shalter is a monster. He is amazing. Nimbus, also amazing. Maybe even Shagirl, too. Okay. Or I think even Yagnets can be surprising. 3 javelins, 280%. That's really good against single target. Really good against single target. And everything's considered basic attacks, which can really pair well with the synergy of this DPS style. But it's just like Rally, where I feel it's single target stuff, which mostly is hard. Some of these like melee guys, again, not great in all content. Shagirl kind of jumps around, is kind of crazy. He kills the enemy, let's see. He leaps toward an enemy, making 5 slashes. So he kind of jumps around your board a lot, so if you need to keep enemies grouped together, he's not going to help with that, so it depends on where you're using him. He could be really fun in, like, Arena, though. But yeah, I feel like Dauntless is just like Rally, and I would prefer to have a good set of legendaries to build a team around and then just using someone like a Shelter as support. Or not support, DPS as well, but like same thing, Nimbus. But they enable they enable them. Like the more people that are doing basic attacks, the better. It's like he's a really, really strong hitting Dauntless unit that can kind of be great on his own. He's one of those exceptions. But for the most part, you kind of want people that are gonna help enable the synergy. Of course, he's gonna bring his own damage, enable someone else's synergy, but it's just a little bit interesting. She's kind of the same here. She has like this, she has a block revive. So if she kills something with a block revive, she can be really helpful in Pillar of Trial or even Arena. But again, melee can be hard to keep alive, so you really need good support around them to do so. All right, so now let's talk about Vortex. So this is, again, I think the same thing is true for Vortex, what I just said for Rally and Dauntless. Building a team for Vortex is hard. I think Lightning might be a little bit stronger as the DPS units because you've got really good people like Yola that can bring the attack penalty as well. Or even, again, Shook, attack penalty. You can't really do anything else though, but this is not the best against the boss. But I think with Yola as your attack down without her ultimate, you can keep it up when you need it, like before the ultimate. You could have Nathaniel as your support, and you could have a more budget, like, I guess you could, if you were desperate, you could still do a Dauntless team or a Rally team with them, but you're probably going to get better options overall for damage. So it's kind of hard to say that I would suggest that. I would just more so be trying to take your best DPS units and then fulfill the supportive roles. So if you had some good Dauntless or Rally units, you could bring in Yola, no matter which one, just for the attack penalty. Or you could bring in, let's go to, again, where are we? Corian or Meredith even for healing. Or, of course, Catherine as support. You could pair them with either one of the synergies just as a supportive unit. But, like, people get hung up on Garius being one of the best tanks in the game, but doesn't mean he's the best for Vortex. I want to shout that out. I feel like you're better off with some people that bring a little more utility. Like, he can bring amazing heals, but unfortunately, like, a lot of the tanks have attack penalty. He does not. So if you bring him into Vortex, you really need to bring someone else like Yola with attack penalty as ultimate that you can time with the boss to make sure you're keeping that up when you need it. You could also, if you don't have a Garius, I think overall for the Vortex specifically, if you don't have Garius as a great healer to help keep your team alive, as a tank, I might actually go Dueling because he brings ally protect and then puts defense up and recovery time on himself. And then, yeah, he at least has a baby attack penalty with his battle skill to go with it. I think he might be a little bit better option. Takes 1% less damage for every 3% HP lost. So, and he could actually be okay as a tank for the sake of helping to keep the rest of your team alive. More of a supportive role, which you don't necessarily need a tank in Vortex. Keep that in mind as well. You could get away with just using like the attack penalty units that also do a little bit of damage, and then just having a healer. If you have a Catherine, you're definitely going to use her in Vortex stage 4 before using her ultimate before the boss is going to put up the defense penalty on its 3rd skill. So that is another good shout there. Like, you might not need a tank in if you went with Rally or Dauntless for your Vortex team. Catherine could be your main person to deal with debuffs and heal. And if you felt like you still needed more heals, you could bring in Corian even, and you'd be pretty surprised. Or if you do have a Garius, you can use him for the sake of heals not necessarily for this needing a tank. Or, of course, like I mentioned earlier, there is also Nathaniel, and he would be pretty solid for Vortex as well, because the shields are going to be helpful, defense up is helpful, and then extra dispelling of debuff from allies within range with his battle skill is going to help, but you don't want to rely on this, so keep that in mind. You might be like, oh, he can take care of the defense penalty. You don't want to rely on a battle skill to deal with that because it's not going to time perfectly. It does have a complete recharge time of 10 seconds, and you can try to time it like, you know, it's going to go twice to every time the boss goes once, but it's not quite perfect. I know some content creators were talking about this actually recently, that it does not perfectly time with the boss. There's definitely some factors, including like animations and stuff that play a role. But yeah, there's a lot of unique characters with both Lightning and Radiant, but I feel like it's one of those like elements that has a few strong stars like Yola that is kind of amazing everywhere, pushing Pillar of Trial, pushing Feywild, Goblin and stuff too, or just as your attack penalty placer. But when it comes to Vortex or like those hard boss content, you kind of really rely on building your team around one strong legendary, I would say, honestly, instead of focusing too much on the epics and the rares. In this case, I think they're more supportive units versus the main DPS. But all right, guys, that's all for today's video. Hope it was helpful. That was all for the season 1 synergy discussions. If you haven't seen the other videos, they will be linked in the description. And I'll see you in the next video or live on Twitch.